Baghdad in the year 900 AD was one of the most extraordinary cities on earth. At a time when much of Europe was still fragmented into small feudal territories, Baghdad stood as the intellectual and cultural capital of the Islamic world. Located along the banks of the Tigris River, this city had become the heart of a vast empire that stretched from North Africa to Central Asia. But Baghdad did not begin as the enormous and sophisticated metropolis it would later become. Its rise was the result of political ambition, strategic geography, and a unique moment in history when knowledge, trade, and culture converged in one place. To understand Baghdad in 900 AD, we must travel back to the year 762, when the Abbasid Caliph Al-Mansur decided to build a new capital for his empire. The Abbasid dynasty had recently taken power from the Umayyads, and they wanted a city that symbolized a new beginning. Al-Mansur chose a location near the ancient trade routes of Mesopotamia, not far from older centers like Ctesiphon and Babylon. The site was ideal. The Tigris River provided water, transportation, and access to trade networks that connected Persia, India, and the Mediterranean world. From this strategic position, Baghdad quickly grew into a powerful center of administration and commerce. What made Baghdad unique from the very beginning was its design. Unlike most cities that expanded gradually over centuries, Baghdad was planned from the start. The original city was built as a massive circular complex known as the Round City. At its center stood the Caliph's palace and the Great Mosque, symbols of both political authority and religious leadership. Surrounding these central buildings were administrative offices, military barracks, and residences for government officials. Massive walls and gates protected the city, and roads radiated outward like spokes of a wheel. Although the Round City was the nucleus of Baghdad, the metropolis soon expanded far beyond its original walls. Within a few decades, new neighborhoods grew along both sides of the Tigris River. Bridges connected different districts, and bustling markets filled the streets. By the year 900 AD, Baghdad had become one of the largest cities in the world, with some historians estimating its population to be close to 1 million people. For medieval standards, this was astonishing. Baghdad was not only large, it was vibrant, diverse, and incredibly active. Merchants from across the known world traveled to Baghdad to trade goods that could not be found anywhere else in such abundance. Silk from China, spices from India, ivory from Africa, furs from Central Asia, and glassware from the Mediterranean all passed through its markets. The city was part of a vast network of trade routes often referred to as the Silk Road, linking east and west through commerce and cultural exchange. Caravans arrived daily, bringing new products, new ideas, and new people. Walking through the markets of Baghdad in 900 AD would have been a sensory experience unlike any other city of the time. The streets were filled with the scents of spices, incense, leather, and cooked food. Artisans worked openly in their workshops, crafting metal tools, jewelry, ceramics, and textiles. Booksellers displayed manuscripts written in beautiful Arabic calligraphy. Scholars, traders, poets, and travelers all mingled in the crowded bazaars. But Baghdad was not famous only for its wealth and trade. It was also the intellectual center of the medieval world. During the Abbasid period, Baghdad became the home of one of the most important institutions in the history of knowledge, the House of Wisdom, known in Arabic as Beit al-Hikmah. The House of Wisdom was more than a library. It was a center of translation, research, and scholarship where scientists and philosophers gathered to study mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. Scholars working in Baghdad translated ancient texts from Greek, Persian, and Sanskrit into Arabic, preserving knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. Works by philosophers such as Aristotle and Plato were studied alongside Persian scientific traditions and Indian mathematical concepts. This movement of translation and study helped ignite what historians now call the Islamic Golden Age. Baghdad became a city where learning was valued, supported by the caliphs, and integrated into daily life. Mathematicians working in Baghdad developed important advances in algebra. Astronomers built observatories and improved methods for calculating planetary motion. Physicians wrote medical texts that would influence both the Islamic world and Europe for centuries. One of the most famous scholars associated with Baghdad was Al-Khwarizmi, who whose work on mathematics introduced systematic methods for solving equations. The word algorithm, which is fundamental to modern computing, actually derives from the Latinized form of his name. In medicine, physicians such as Al-Razi wrote detailed studies on diseases, treatments, and surgical techniques. Hospitals in Baghdad were among the most advanced institutions of the medieval world, offering organized care and training for medical students. This combination of science, culture, and trade created a city that attracted thinkers and travelers from across continents. Baghdad was not isolated. It was connected to a global network of knowledge. Travelers from Europe, Persia, India, and North Africa came to the city seeking education, commerce, or patronage. The diversity of languages, religions, and cultures contributed to the city's dynamic atmosphere. Although the Abbasid Caliphate was Islamic, Baghdad was home to Muslims, Christians, Jews, and other communities who lived and worked within the city. Religious scholars debated theology in mosques and academic circles. Poets composed verses celebrating love, nature, and philosophy. Storytellers entertained audiences with tales that would later become part of the famous collection known as 1001 Nights. The architecture of Baghdad also reflected its prosperity. Mosques with large courtyards and elegant arches dominated many districts. Palaces built for the caliphs displayed intricate decoration, gardens, and flowing water features that symbolized paradise in Islamic tradition. Wealthy merchants constructed houses with interior courtyards that protected families from the intense Mesopotamian heat while providing privacy and comfort. The Tigris River was central to the life of the city. Boats carried goods, passengers, and supplies along the waterway, connecting Baghdad with other cities of the empire. The riverbanks were lined with warehouses, docks, and busy commercial activity. At sunset, the reflections of buildings and lanterns on the water created a scene that many travelers described as breathtaking. Despite its wealth and intellectual achievements, Baghdad was not free from political challenges. The Abbasid Caliphate governed an enormous territory, and maintaining control over distant provinces was never easy. Internal rivalries, regional governors, and military factions sometimes weakened central authority. However, during the 9th and early 10th centuries, Baghdad still maintained its reputation as the cultural heart of the Islamic world. The influence of the city extended far beyond its walls. Ideas developed in Baghdad spread through trade routes and scholarly networks into Persia, North Africa, and eventually Europe. When European scholars later began translating Arabic texts into Latin during the Middle Ages, much of the knowledge they encountered had been preserved and expanded by scholars working in Baghdad centuries earlier. In this way, the intellectual achievements of Baghdad played a crucial role in shaping global history. The city represented a moment when knowledge from different civilizations was gathered, studied, and developed into new discoveries. By the year 900 AD, Baghdad stood not only as the capital of an empire, but as one of the brightest centers of human civilization. Its markets, libraries, scholars, and artisans made it a place where commerce and knowledge thrived together. Although the centuries that followed would bring political instability and eventually destruction during the Mongol invasion of 1258, the legacy of Baghdad's Golden Age remains one of the most remarkable chapters in the story of cities. The Baghdad of 900 AD reminds us that cities are more than collections of buildings. They are living centers where cultures meet, ideas grow, and history changes direction. At its peak, Baghdad was not just a city of wealth and power. It was a city of curiosity, discovery, and learning that illuminated the medieval world.